All right, so we're going to move on to notes number 2 now. We are going to talk about what happens when there is a negative inside of the square root. So, I can find the square root of a negative number. Let's just do that. I can find the square root of a negative number. That's the goal of our lesson today. So we'll call this notes number 2. Imaginary numbers. So imaginary numbers come into our vocabulary when there's a negative inside of the square root. So you may have tried this before. If you ever tried to take the square root, say, of -4, your calculator would say domain error. And that's because if you think about it, if you were trying to find the area of a square, well, area space is not negative. It is always a positive value. So that's why you kind of have to create this set of imaginary numbers to make this work. So when there's a negative inside of the square root, we're going to use this idea. Let's see, square root, it's an ugly square root, sorry. The square root of -1 is, this is the letter I. And we must remove the negative before we simplify. So it's actually just going to be one additional step to the skill that we have been working on with simplifying a square root. So now you're going to have a negative inside. We're going to have to use I in place of it, and then we'll simplify just as we have done before. So let's look at example 1. I've got the square root of -4. So in our steps, the first thing we're going to do is separate the negative so step 1, separate the negative. And what I mean by that is we're going to pretend that this -4 is not just -4, that it's two pieces. We're going to pretend that we have a square root of -1 times a square root of 4. So we separated the negative. In step 2, we're going to replace the square root of -1 with I. So the square root of -1 is I. They mean the same thing. And now we're going to simplify that square root. So we're going to simplify the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is a perfect square. So I would break that down into 2 and 2. I have a pair of 2's. So 2 comes out. There's nothing left over. So the square root is no longer necessary. And the I is going to move behind the number. We treat I sort of like a variable. Just like if you were to see 2x, the variable always comes after the number. That's exactly how we're going to use the I property. So this would be your final answer. Okay, so let's try that one more time, and then I'll give you a couple to try on your own. Actually, it looks like I did two more examples, so we'll do 2 more. So number 2, I've got the square root of -75. So now that you're getting the gist of the process, I'm going to go a little bit quicker, and I'm not going to write all of the steps down, but I'm doing the same steps that we just listed before. So in step 1, I separate the negative from the square root. The square root of -1 is I. And now I'm going to start breaking down 75. 75 is 3 times 25, which is 5 times 5. So I have a pair of 5s. 1 can come out. So I have 5. And then we put the I. And then we're going to put the leftover 3 inside of the square root. Did that go okay? We're going to do it one more time. Maybe I went too fast that time. Let's try number 3. The square root of -56. So we separate the negative the square root of -1 is I, so this is not negative any longer. So I can start breaking down 56. I can start dividing by the perfect squares, 4, 9, 16, however you want to do it, or you can break it into the prime factors. For this one, I think I will break it down by primes. 56 divided by 2, oops. 56 divided by 2 is 28. Here, I'm going to rewrite this here. Oh, goodness. And then I'm going to break it down. So I've got 2 and 28, which would be 2 and 14, which would be 2 and 7. So I see I have a pair of 2's, and then I have a leftover 2 and leftover 7. So, oops. From the pair, 1 of the 2's will be represented outside. Oh, I want that to be red. And then don't forget to bring down your I. And then you have your square root of your leftovers. So leftover in here, I have a 2 and a 7. 2 times 7, I would multiply that back together for 14. 2i root 14. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple to try, and we'll see how it goes. Try these. Okay, so please hit pause. Use your steps. Step 1 is to separate the square root of -1, make it I. Step 2, you're going to break down that square root just like we've done before. Make sure anything that comes out, the number comes first, I is second, and then the square root with any extra numbers that didn't have a twin stay in. All right, so hit pause. You try. All right, hopefully that's going well. If not, please reach out and we can get you some extra examples or some extra practice to kind of sort out the concept. Thanks so much for watching.